Hello. I am a guest speaker today. Anne gave me the format today. I don't know if you recognize me or not, but I am Sojourner Truth. Some of you may know me because of the famous Ain't I a Woman speech, which I will, get into later. But I wanted to give you a little bit of history about myself. When I was born, my name was Isabella Bomfrey. My parents, James and Elizabeth Bomfrey, were bought at a slave auction, and I was born in 1796 in Swartkill, New York. My family belonged to Charles Hardenberg, and actually his father is the one who had bought my parents, but he kept them. When I was 9 years old, Charles died, and at that point, I was sold for $100 along with some sheep to John Neely. He beat me daily, sometimes with rods. I only spoke Dutch until I was 9 years old, and sometimes I was beaten for not being able to learn English fast enough. In 1808, I was sold for $105. No sheep this time. After 18 months, in 1810, I was sold to John Dumont. He was kinder, but his wife was harsh and made life difficult. Part of that could be because he raped me and I had a child by him. That could possibly be part of her problem. In 1815, I fell in love with Robert. He was a slave on another farm, and we wanted to get married. But his owner would not allow that because if we had children, the children would belong to John Dumont instead of to him. So that was not allowed. Robert did sneak over to see me, but they caught him and he was beaten really almost within an inch of his life, and he was taken away. I don't know if he was sold or what, but I never saw him again. After that, I was forced to marry an older slave named Thomas. I had 5 children. One was stillborn, one was from Mr. Dumont, and 3 with Thomas. In 1799, New York began legislation for the abolition of slavery. Do you know how long that took? 28 years. Dumont promised me my freedom, actually in 1826, but he changed his mind. So I escaped with Sophia, who was my daughter. She was an infant, and he says I ran away. That would be wrong. I walked out in full daylight because I believed it was right. Now you're asking, why didn't I take the other children? That's because legally they were not freed until they had been bound servants into their 20s. So I did not take them. I wound up at the home of Isaac and Maria Van Wagenen, and they were very kind. They took us both in, and they paid Mr. Dumont $20 for the year of service that I did not serve with him. And I stayed there until the New York State Emancipation Act was approved in 1827. I also found out that Mr. Dumont sold my son Peter, who was 5 years old, to someone in Alabama. Well, that was illegal because he was bound to him until he was supposed to be in his 20s. And so with the help of the Van Wagenens, I sued and I got Peter back. They had abused him and treated him terribly. While staying at the Van Wagenens, I became a Christian. And it really changed my life. I worked for different evangelists, And it was just a wonderful change. On June 1st, 1843, I had become a Methodist at that time. It was a Pentecost Sunday, and that's when I changed my name to Sojourner Truth, because I felt the Spirit of God called me to preach. So I became an itinerant preacher. In 1844, I joined the Northampton Association of Education and Industry in Florence, Massachusetts. It was founded by abolitionists, and they supported women's rights, religious tolerance, and pacifism. I worked there supervising men and women with laundry and so on, and they are actually the group that encouraged me to give my first anti-slavery speech that year. In 1850, I had a friend named Olive Gilbert, and I told her my story, and I actually dictated it to her. And William Lloyd Garrison published it, and it was called The Narrative of Sojourner Truth, a Northern Slave. In 1851, at the Ohio Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio, is when this speech that you know of as Ain't I a Woman occurred. Now, you're probably asking about the title. You can't tell from looking at me sitting down, but I am 6 feet tall. And the way that I carried myself, some people doubted that I was actually a woman. So there are 2 versions of this, as I said. The most familiar one is written by Frances Gage. I say written by because she did take elements of my speech, but she published this 12 years after I gave the speech. In addition, when she did, she put it in Southern slave dialect, and I never spoke like that. So, if you would like to hear that, I understand on this YouTube thing you have here, Cecily Tyson gives a wonderful rendition of that, as does Kerry Washington. The lesser-known version was published 1 month after the speech. It was actually reported on in several newspapers, but the one that I am speaking of was by Reverend Marius Robinson. He and I were good friends, and before he published it, we met and went over the content so that he was sure that he had my ideas down. And that is the one that I will share with you later. I continued to speak about women's rights, prison reform, Negroes' rights. Now, I also knew Frederick Douglass, and we were okay for a while, but then, you know, a man is a man. And so, although he believed in rights for Negroes, he felt that only Negro men should have the right to vote. Well, I owned a house, I paid taxes, I think I should have a right to vote. Excuse me, sorry. There we go. So I continued, as I say, to travel and to speak. There was one speech that I was giving in 1865, and again the accusation came, "Are you really a woman?" Well, you may be shocked to hear this, but I was in the middle of the speech. I heard the accusation. I said, okay. I unbuttoned my blouse and showed them my breasts, and that did shut them up. No question there. During the Civil War, I helped recruit black troops for the Union Army. Actually, my grandson was one of those troops. In 1864, I met Abraham Lincoln. You can see the selfie I have with him online if you like. I also rode in streetcars to help free the streetcars from desegregation. In 1871, on New Year's Day, it was the 8th anniversary of Negro freedom. And at that time, I shared with the audience some of the things that I have said, and I'll say it again. But my mother, she had told me to always pray for good masters and mistresses. And you know, that didn't happen. And I would question God and say, why didn't you give me good masters and mistresses? Because I was beaten and whipped and so on. And I admit to you that I hated white people. I did. Until I met my final master, the Lord Jesus. And now I'm filled with love for everyone. I died in Battle Creek, Michigan on November 26, 1883. Now, this is a little aside that I just found out. The U.S. Treasury Department in 2016 announced that I would be on the back of $10 bills in 2020 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, which was the women's right to vote. Now, I would like to actually read to you the more accurate version of the speech that I gave. May I say a few words? I want to say a few words about this matter. I am a woman's rights. I have as much muscle as any man and can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed. And can any man do more than that? I have heard much about the sexes being equal. I can carry as much as any man and eat as much too, when I can get it. I am as strong as any man that is now. As for intellect, all I can say is, if women have a pint and man has a quart, why can't she have her little pint full? You need not be afraid to give us our rights for fear we'll take too much, for we can't take more than our pint'll hold. The poor men seem to be all in confusion and don't know what to do. Why, children, if you have women's rights, give it to her and you will feel better. You will have your own rights and they won't be so much trouble. I can't read, but I can hear. I have heard the Bible and have learned that Eve caused man to sin. Well, if woman upset the world, do give her a chance to set it right side up again. The lady has spoken about Jesus, how he never spurned woman from him and she was right. When Lazarus died, Mary and Martha came to him with faith and love and besought him to raise their brother. And Jesus wept, and Lazarus came forth. And how came Jesus into this world? Through God who created him, and woman who bore him. Man, where is your part? But the women are coming up, blessed be God, and a few of the men are coming up with them. But man is in a tight place. The poor slave is on him. Woman is coming on him, and he is surely between a hawk and a buzzard. Well, that's it. I hope you found it interesting, and you can find out more about me if you like. Next week, Anne will be back, and it will be her birthday. I'm going to tell you how old she is going to be, but, you know, don't tell everybody. 74. Okay. Thank you for listening. It's been a pleasure, and have a blessed day.